Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of CKCB Features, the interview show attached to Crimes, Cults, and Beer, the podcast. So, um, today we have what I think is going to be a very interesting interview. I got an email from a publicist about a man named Jonathan Todd Schwartz, and he was a major financial advisor for Hollywood's, and he managed people like Beyonce, Mariah Carey, Gwyneth Paltrow. He even had a nickname as the Diva Whisperer, and which is, yeah, I mean, it's to be able to be known in that type of industry is just crazy. But he had issues with drugs and gambling, which caused a downfall. He embezzled over $4.7 million from clients that he was supposed to be protecting their assets, and because obviously that's a no-no, um, his reputation took a hit for it. But and so he's here. I mean, he's recovered and everything, and now he is the director of Altus Rehab in I believe it's Encino, California, and I'm expecting a wild story. I haven't really looked into this one other than just vetting the story, because I've gotten hosed before, but I did not get hosed on this one, and so I'm excited for this one. So how's it going? How's it going, Jonathan?
It's going well. Thanks for having me on here. Nice introduction. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on. So I'm just going to turn the mic over to you, and I'll just ask questions as they come to me. I'm excited to hear this story.
I'm excited to hear your questions. Bring them on.
All right, I got it. So take a start at the beginning, I guess.
So I grew up in upstate New York. Um, at age 4, my father abandoned my mother, myself, and my younger brother. We moved around lots of different apartments. I grew up poor. My mother was forced to take 3 jobs to put food on the table, roof over our head. And she was a young mother who wasn't prepared. And that's something that she shared with me many years ago.
Oh
Um,
wow.
Especially now you add the fact that my father left her to raise myself and my brother. She could imagine the kind of stress that she was under, and I received the brunt of that stress. So I experienced a lot of childhood trauma, physical and emotional abuse. I don't use any of the trauma throughout your podcast and anywhere I communicate or talk, speaking engagements or otherwise, as an excuse for my maladaptive behaviors, for my addictions, for my infidelity. I take full ownership in that.
Well,
So
I
I,
mean, yeah. I mean that's good. That's good that because I've heard people, they'll get out there and say, "Hey, this happened to me, so therefore I'm now a criminal or whatever." And yeah, I was, you're new to this show and everything, but I was raised in a religious cult, and that's part of why I wanted, telling my story and everything. So so yeah, I totally get trauma, and I totally get separating yourself from it. I mean, did you go through a period where, you know, like when the walls came down around you? Did you go through a period where you did kind of point the finger at the trauma of your past, like ever, like even for like a split second?
I'm sure for a split second I perhaps did, but where I am today, my life is very different in recovery compared to active addiction. I mean, I've played the victim role before in active addiction. That's a very common trait for people struggling with substances and or, in my case, including gambling, behavioral addiction. I definitely sat in the victim role. I definitely played the woo me game. It took me a while, to be frank, to get to this place where I'm at today with a healthy mindset. But the struggles were real, like I said, and I didn't remember. I don't remember my childhood still to this day. Maybe about 5% of it. I suppressed those emotions for about 46 years. I'm 55 years old. Uh, the moment I started to work on my trauma and work on myself and able to flush out all the suppressed emotions, it was very healing and cathartic. It gave me an opportunity to connect with my mind and body and just try and go on that journey of, you know, every day doing the next right action and one day at a time.
Yeah.
And so one of the places we moved, sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right.
One of the places we moved, I'm kind of going to give you like a quick chronological order. Uh, when I went into ninth grade, my mother moved myself and my brother to San Francisco. At that point, went to high school there. The trauma wasn't getting any better, so I discovered my dad. Called him up and said, "Hey, I want to come back to New York, go finish my senior year of high school in the place that I grew up." And there was no discipline in the house. I would walk in numerous times. There would be coke whores in the house. Not a thing that a senior in high school should be witnessing every day. Uh,
Right.
he was the community's drug dealer. He too was addicted to gambling and cocaine. And I met my high school sweetheart that year, my senior year, whom I eventually married, and we had, nice marriage, 23 years. Towards During my active addiction, it was no longer a nice marriage because I wasn't emotionally present. I didn't treat her with the respect she deserved. I wasn't emotionally present for my kids. And that's, during that, that's when I started. I started gambling in 2010. But before that, when I graduated college in San Francisco, I have 7 CPAs in my family. One of them was a very successful entertainment business manager specializing in music. And when I graduated, I called him up and asked him I told him I'm ready to come work for you. I'll move down to LA. I'll move down to Hollywood. And he said, "You're not ready. You're immature. You're irresponsible. What do you know about business management?" So I still at this point had a high ego, and I was hurt. It was deflated. But in hindsight, I took a job. I worked in the financial district for a sole practitioner CPA firm for 3.5 years. And in 1994 or five, he called me and he said, "I'm ready." So at this point in my life, I had my first of 3 sons. So he and my wife and I drove from San Francisco down to Southern California. And that was the start of my introduction to entertainment business management. I was a CPA, and I was the first one in, last one to leave. I didn't want the word nepotism associated with me. I wanted to prove that I've earned this position at his firm. And I was a sponge. I absorbed as much information flow as I could receive. I got paid very little money at this time in my life, but I viewed it as an opportunity that otherwise I wouldn't receive. And if I did receive it, it would require me to go to grad school and
Hmm.
take out a FAFSA loan. So I learned from someone and I got paid at the same time. In
That's
two,
cool. Kind of like a paid apprenticeship.
Well said, absolutely, and that's how I viewed that because I was not a person who looked for short term gains. I was a long term visionary, so I believed in myself. I believed in the education I was receiving while working in that apprenticeship, as you say. And in 2009, 10, his firm was acquired by a Chase Manhattan Bank at the time, now known as J.P. Morgan. He asked me if I wanted to get into family wealth management, investment banking. I said, "Cuz, thanks for the opportunities, but no, thank you. I want to stay in this space, entertainment business management." So I joined a firm called GSO Business Management. One of the partners there was a friend of my cousin's from childhood, so we hit it off really well. And from there, I was able to develop a very solid A-list client list of music, film, television, and professional athletes. And it started with,
Nice.
Alanis Morrisette. And I mentioned Alanis because she's the only celebrity of the 5 or 6 that I embezzled money from that went public with this. The other 4 or 5, I'm choosing to respect that they wanted their privacy, and
Mm.
and so I want to honor their request because, frankly, neither client deserved to be a target of my gambling addiction, which I use that addiction to embezzle monies from them.
Right. And I think I don't know. I think I do remember hearing something. I'm not exactly sure when. Because I mean, I don't follow celebrities. I'm one of those people I couldn't care less about them. But I'm more interested in the people behind the scenes, the people that manage them, the people that handle them. I'm more to me that's a more interesting story than what Alanis Morissette's favorite cereal is. But but I do when you mentioned her, and I think I found that in the when I did a quick Google search. I think I found Alanis Morrisette there, but I'm thinking that I did hear something in the news about how you know, uh, she had been, you know, got
Yes.
by somebody that was, by handling her or whatever. I don't remember when that was, but it kind of rang a little bit familiar to me.
Yeah, no, that was in
So
early 2016. That's when my criminal behavior was exposed publicly in a lot of platforms. And
that sounds about right. Honestly, it wasn't too awful long ago, but it wasn't. It wasn't back in the '90s or anything like that when she was like super popular and everything. So
no, and it's funny you say super popular because, her and I've had conversations where she's wondering why she's not generating all this income. And the reality is she was not as relevant in 2016 as she was when Jagged Little Pill was first released. Now, I say that with no disrespect, it's just a fact. And
well, yeah, and I get that.
in 2015, she actually fired me because I wasn't paying enough attention to her, is what I've been told. And that's when my crime was discovered, ironically, by the business management firm she retained, which happened to be my cousin's firm where I started my career.
Oh
So my
shit.
my cousin's partner is the one that discovered the 4.6 million that I embezzled from her out of the total 7 million I embezzled from a handful of other clients. Uh, but I'm not disappointed in my cousin. He did what he was supposed to do.
Yeah,
That
he
was
did
his
his
job.
job.
He did his
Oh,
job.
so wait, when did I mean? Yeah, you said that your dad has had a gambling problem. Is that kind of where he did he kind of like pass that along to you basically? You like the old commercial from the late '80s, just like I learned it from watching you. I mean, was it was it kind of like that?
Well, not kind of. It was. I mean, there's now that I don't want to reveal too much where I am today at this point in our podcast, but I'm now a therapist and a program director, and one of the things that I learned in grad school, becoming a therapist with an emphasis in addiction and trauma, is that there's what's called multi-generational transmission. So what your mom or dad may have, or your grandparents, or up that ancestral ladder, can be passed on to us. And again, that's just the disease component of it. I'm not, there's also a choice component. I'm a firm believer that addiction is both a disease and a choice.
Right.
I'm the one that decided to make those poor choices, regardless of what contributed to it. So, yes, my father's addictions likely contributed to my addictions, but I didn't grow up in an era where asking for help was a strength, nor did I view it at this point in my life as a strength. Um, it was considered a weakness in my mind. And today I feel very differently about that. But had I asked for help, a lot of things would have been different. So, yeah, that's the onset was really just, it started when I was in college gambling. I wanted to, I grew up poor, as I said earlier. A lot of my fraternity brothers in college, came from affluent families. And I wanted to be part of, not only just the fraternity, but the social life outside of the fraternity or Greek world. And so one day I came up with this brilliant idea. Why don't I ask one of my fraternity brothers if we can become bookies for the fraternities, not just our fraternity, from all the Greek life on campus? And he said, let's do it. Well, we were the only bookies in the 2 weeks that we were open for operations to lose
Oh,
$10,000.
oh damn.
And so 5,000 was my responsibility and 5,000 was his. 5,000 to me at that time of my life is like $100 million today. I couldn't afford to pay it. And so instead of facing my fraternity brother, being honest with him, I left school. And that's
So
when
see, I'm not that big of into gambling. I mean, I'm a former truck driver, thank God. But I've stopped at some of the casinos in like Arizona and New Mexico and stuff like that. And quite frankly, I was bored. I was bored shitless. It's just like, okay, I don't get this. I've made when online gambling on sports became legal in Florida, I one of the things was like, okay, your first bet is guaranteed. Like if you lose it, you can if you lose, then you get a second shot at it. Well, I bet on a football game, and what, because I thought that the Dolphins were going to beat the Chiefs in the playoffs. I'm a Dolphins fan,
I'm
but
sorry. I'm sorry to hear that.
but so I lost. So then but I got another crack at it, and then I turned around, and I took that money, and I put the money on Green Bay to beat Dallas, and obviously Green Bay beat the snot out of Dallas. So, but you know what? I was just like, okay, lesson learned. I'm done.
Oh my
You
God.
know. But so I don't know. So you said that you guys were broke. What happened? You guys didn't have the money to back it up, and like everybody that placed bets with you won. Is that kind of what happened?
Not everyone who won, but smart bookies. What they do is they are making this up. There's, let's say, 100 people who place bets with them, or 100 bets placed with them. What you want to do as a bookie is you want to balance those bets out. So if you take the Dolphins against the New York Giants, of course the Giants would normally win. I don't want to rub that in, but um,
Not currently.
that's true, true. But at this point, perhaps this 2006, probably earlier in 2000. It was probably, yeah, maybe 1991. Yes. Um, what you do is you just balance it out. So the bookie gets 10%, right? So if you
Hmm.
balance it out 100 bets, 50-50 based, and look at the value of each bet, of course, you're usually smart enough that regardless of who wins, you're going to at a minimum collect 10%,
Right.
right, of the net. And so we weren't that smart in college. So we didn't do any of that. That was too hard for us at that point to evaluate. And so that's why we lost the money that we lost. And so that hence brought me to San Francisco. Um, and that once I went down and worked for my cousin, I placed one bet through his partner, and I lost $3,000, and his partner paid that for me. So those two events that I just mentioned, both the college bookie and placing a bet with my cousin's partner, were like the two key components of my entree into gambling. But it wasn't the point where I was addicted or identified as a compulsive gambler. It was in moderation at that point, but clearly it was still in my subconscious mind. And so my addiction began in 2010. And at that point, I was, a partner at GSO Business Management. So I start working there in 2000, worked there, about 4 years into my employment at that point, I was made partner. And now I started to really get the who's who in Hollywood as clients. I was beginning to have that name you mentioned, a diva whisperer. I was really building a beautiful practice thanks to a beautiful staff that we had, and really nice professionals, entertainment lawyers, managers, agents who wanted to work with me, um, because my reputation was becoming, credible and successful.
Right.
I didn't view it as success because I started now in 2010 my criminal behavior during my addiction. And so, here we are in 2010. Now I'm taking, $25,000. I'm quote unquote borrowing it from Alanis, and I'm going to pay her back next week. Well, next week I lost more money. 3 months later, I lost more money. Years go, a year or two or three go by, and now I'm
Like the snowball effect.
absolutely the snowball effect. And I was so scared. I never even paid attention to how much money I was stealing. I just didn't want to face that in reality. I was living in denial. I told nobody, not a single soul, about my criminal behavior. And, once 2010 started and my addiction started, there was no moral compass, no integrity. I violated my fiduciary responsibility to my clients and partners and staff. And now I'm going down a slippery slope.
Yeah.
You know,
Damn, that's rough. So 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 that's it. You're just borrowing and borrowing from Alanis Morrisette and several others and everything, and it's just for whatever reason, it's like you might win some, but you're losing more than you're winning, and you're not able to make the money back. So you keep going at it. Um, was Alanis the was Alanis the one that that basically blew the lid off of it, or did other people have suspicions that it was going on?
I've been told from former staff members of I from my from my firm that when I re-entered society from prison in 2020, that mentioned that the partners were aware, but not to the extent in terms of the amount. But they knew I was taking cash from clients, requesting it from the bank to pay my bookie. But because I was in their minds the rainmaker of the firm at this time, they only approached me one time. And when they approached me that one time, I looked in their face and lied to them that I'm not doing anything wrong. This is what the client requested. I'm in denial, right? Not
Right.
uncommon, but in addiction. But I was definitely in denial. I was definitely dishonest. My partners were great partners. They too did not deserve my poor choices. But I still lied to them because the idea is now I'm really a degenerate compulsive gambler chasing, which I didn't like to gamble at this point, but I'm
Yeah.
chasing so that, this fantasy, this grandiosity of a gambler's mindset is this takes one big win.
Yeah, one big win. Yeah, and I get that. One big win, everything is okay.
All my
But that
problems are solved. I could no longer have to live in fear.
it's like a heroin addict chasing the dragon.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
just like, but in your case, the dragon was that one big win. It's just like, okay, I need the, I need the 1 in 15 um, Cleveland Browns to knock off the Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl champions.
Well, and the sad thing is, I was such a degenerate gambler that I didn't bet on that game, one game that you just mentioned, let's say on a Sunday. I bet every day
The
for
parlays and stuff.
parlays, teasers, over unders. So, and I didn't just bet the one game; I bet all the games on the board, right? And I did that for
Mm,
6 years. NFL,
okay.
college football, NBA, college basketball, baseball, and it was out of control. And so, I'm chasing and chasing and chasing, and of course, I'm losing, losing, and losing. And now you mentioned, like, when did Lannis, was she the one that went public with this, or one that initiated the discovery of my crime? And the answer is yes. So when she fired me, there were the financials were sent to her from our office and all the 26 plus boxes, and I received the call when I was in Tampa Bay. At this point, Beyonce was rehearsing for her Lemonade tour, and I was her business manager, and I was responsible for making sure that her financial goals and expectations were met relative to whatever her profit margin from global tour was going to be. And I received a call from my partners. They said that they received a call from my cousin's partner and asked what this 4.6 million that Alanis took was for. And that was the moment, one of the few moments where I'm like, okay, now I'm caught. But you know
Yeah.
what? I'm going to lie again. I'm going to tell them that she wanted to invest in a cannabis business. Maybe I could buy myself some time and figure it out.
But of course, they went to her and to verify.
Precisely. At which point, her business manager reported to my former partners that Alanis was not investing in any cannabis business, nor did she know any, $4.6 million over a few years was stolen from her. So
Hmm.
now I fly back to Los Angeles and I confront my partners, or I should say, they confronted me. And long story short, I volunteered to take a lie detector test. So now this is in first quarter 2016. Why did I agree to that? Because again, I thought I could beat anything, right? This guy who's a degenerate gambler doing cocaine, and thinks that he's Superman. I'm not super. I wasn't Superman, but my ego was so high and I was so scared. I'm in fight or flight, survival mode.
Right.
So now I'm celebrating around May 8th weekend, 2016, with my wife at a hotel in Santa Barbara, our 23-year anniversary. And I receive a call from my partner, and one of my partners, and he said, "Well, you said you would take a lie detector test, so tomorrow we want you to drive down to Beverly Hills, which is an hour and a half from Santa Barbara, and take a lie detector test with one of the four best leading former FBI agent polygraphers, that work for the government. I'm like, okay, great. But now I hang up. I'll be there. Now I got to tell my wife the truth. My wife, like I said earlier, nobody knew what I was doing. That made it really hard too. I lived in fear every night going to sleep, or every time I heard a siren, that are they coming for me? Is my phone tapped by the FBI? This is not a way to live. But again, that's
No.
because of what I did. It's nobody's fault. It's mine. So now I have to hang up the phone. I have to tell my wife that the lies that I've done, and the criminal that I am, and I'm facing 23 years in federal prison. And so, I then decided to Google how to beat a lie detector test. Like, really? So I'll be back, honey, tomorrow. I'm just going to go down, take the lie detector test. I'm going to beat it, and enjoy your day at the spa, at the hotel. And so I decide, like a real genius, that on the complete 1.5 hour drive, I'm going to take cocaine and snort it the whole way, and
Oh
I'm going
God.
to place my last bet. I mean, what schmuck, what person thinks he or she can beat a lie detector test on a stimulant like cocaine, which is not going to go very well when everything is placed on my
Yeah.
chest?
Everything is going to be. You're the I mean they're not admissible in court, but the lie detector test, it's based on your heartbeat, your your physical reaction to the questions and stuff like that. And if you're like whacked out on a stimulant like cocaine, then I mean you could say the sky is blue, and that's going to get a reaction out of you. Like that's going to measure on the freaking test. So you kind of shot yourself in the foot there. And I'm not, I'm not, don't think I, I'm not lecturing. I'm just kind of having a conversation. I'm kind of trying to put myself into the situation and everything, and look at it from your point of view based on what the reality of the situation was, because clearly you were somewhere other than reality during that point.
Well, and that's what addiction is, right? So you said,
Hmm.
and by the way, feel free to say anything. I could accept, trust
No,
me.
I'm not here to judge.
Yeah, no, no, but
I'm here to do an interview and hear a compelling story.
no, thank you. And so, what's very common, self-sabotaging, right? That's what we call it in addiction. I most of my choices, many of my choices were poor, and that's about self-sabotaging. And that's living in that fight or flight response since childhood. And so going down there, here I am placing my last bet, doing lines and lines of cocaine, walk in to see the polygrapher, and I put my feet up on his desk. I lay back with my chair. I'm high as a kite,
Oh God.
and I'm thinking I can beat this. Like, this is the mindset that I had. Like,
Meanwhile, the guy's like, this guy's got his feet on my fucking desk.
correct. Like, who does this guy think he is, right?
Yeah.
Right? And so, I know I'm trying to build a rapport with this guy. I want this guy to like me, right? I want to try and get him in on my side so he could help me pass this. So I'm thinking, we talked for 2 hours. It sounds like he likes me. Well, that's what most polygraphers do. They want you to believe they trust you and they like you. So the moment that he attached all those lovely uh, things on my chest, like you said, uh, the questions started to come. I could feel my body shaking. But when I was done and said goodbye, I look forward to hearing the good news from you, sir. Um, I called my wife and I said, I'm on my way back. How did you do? I did great. I passed this thing with flying colors. Now I head back to the hotel. I try to go onto my work computer and I could not access work. So clearly I
Mm.
was cut off from the firm's access. Called my attorney, who was Nathan Hochman at the time. He's still Nathan Hochman, but now he's also the district attorney here in Los Angeles. And I retained him in that moment, well, before that moment, the day before. And I said, have you heard from the polygrapher yet? He said, I just heard from the polygrapher. And I just want you to know, Jonathan, you failed that test worse than anybody in the history of this former FBI agent polygrapher. I said, okay.
Damn.
So that was now called moment two, moment three of the crossroad of, like, this is inevitable. And so the next day, went in and met with him. He was able to strike a plea agreement for 4 to 6 years. As I said earlier, I could have faced 23 years.
23.
I was very fortunate that that's a plea agreement was reached, because if it wasn't, it would have been very close to a 20-plus year sentence. Um, Now, fast forward to the courtroom sentencing on May 3rd, 2017. My Alanis came and spoke, and so did one of my former partners, Bernie Goodvie, and he spoke. And to be honest, if I was the judge and I heard all the hurt, I heard both Alanis and Bernie speak so eloquently, and how much I hurt Alanis and how much I hurt our firm from Bernie, I would have thrown a 20-year sentence at myself. I mean, it was very heartfelt what they said. And I also saw my wife and my middle son on the side of the federal government during my sentencing. That didn't help my confidence level in the courtroom. Um, but the reason why both my wife and middle son were there, they would not have been there if I didn't do what I did. So,
Right.
I've obviously learned a lot in recovery about forgiveness. And
But already at that point, you're starting to realize it's like, hey, I'm here because of what I did. It
not
wouldn't be.
not really.
Oh, so
No.
that came later.
That
That came
yeah.
later.
So after
Okay.
so after so the judge gives me a 6 year sentence. I'm thinking I'm going to get a year and a half, 2 years. Now I go outside and I curse at my middle son. How dare you sit on the side of the government? Blah blah blah. I'm angry. I'm I'm heading to prison in 3 months to face a 6 year sentence. And it took me May 9th, 2016 is my sober date. So this coming May, I'll be 9 years. It took me a few weeks, months to start adopting the principles of the 12-step program in recovery. And once I could adopt that lifestyle that I was going to commit myself to, is when I realized what I shared with you earlier. Like, I can't blame anybody for how they want their opinions. Their opinions are their opinions. What they decide to do, they're adults. That's on them. But so I don't blame anybody but myself for anybody's thoughts and behaviors that resulted from me making such poor choices and hurting so many people. I mean, I hurt so many people. I hurt 75 employees that worked for us. I hurt the entire entertainment industry. I hurt even the clients that I did not embezzle from, who trusted me. I hurt people in my community that my kids were raised in. And most importantly, I hurt my loved ones, my beautiful three sons, my wife at the time, my mother and stepfather. And frankly, I hurt myself.
Yeah. So so you were sentenced to what, 6 years? You said.
6 years.
Okay. Did you serve the entire 6 years?
No, so I was on 14 months of pre sentencing, calling in for drug testing a few times a week. On July 11th, 2017, when I surrendered to Sheridan, Oregon federal prison camp, I went there because they have a residential drug and alcohol program, and that
Mm-hmm.
took a year off my sentence. It took me 2 years there to complete the residential drug alcohol program, otherwise known as RDAP. And so now instead of 72 months, I'm down to 60 months. And then you have some good time that so on and so forth. So after I completed the program, I requested to be transferred to Taft at this time in near Bakersfield, California, with the hopes that more people, family and friends would visit me. And I got a lovely first class ticket on U.S. Marshal Conair with handcuffs, waist, ankles, and hands with every class of inmate. So that was a really eye-opening experience for me. I was placed in a detention center in Pahrump, Nevada for a month before being transferred to Taft. I was released because of COVID on April 16th, 2020, serving 33 months incarcerated. However, when I was released, I had this I was required to do 16 months of home confinement with an ankle monitor and very little limited movement. And then
Right.
after that was over, I faced 3 years of probation. So I've given the government over 9 years of my life. Um, and today, my world is very different than what you heard so far on this beautiful podcast.
So when you get out, um, it's just like, okay, the ankle monitor comes off and everything. It's just like, okay, it's back to, it's back to the to life in the norm, you know, everyday life and whatnot. I mean, is there a gap? What happened from the time that you got out to the time that you got to your your present posting with your present career?
So I was
Um,
dating a woman from prison because at this point I was divorced before I went into prison, and she was I had borrowed money. Well, I didn't borrow money. I asked a friend of mine, if she would pay for my at the time my called girlfriend, fiance, and her daughter to live in this house that I was once renting. Once I separated and got ultimately divorced with my wife, and this woman, she would come visit me a few times, maybe maybe half a dozen times, but it was never lovey-dovey. There was something going on. So I would ask her when she visited, if you're with another man, I totally respect that. I mentioned to you before I left, like, I don't expect that. However, if you do have another man in your life, then my friend is no longer going to allow you to stay in her house. And so she was the person who had to pick me up when I was released from prison, because she was the one I put on my, when I surrendered. So she regrettably picked me up, and the first thing she said, the first thing an inmate wants to see when they believe they're walking out to see their fiance or girlfriend or wife is a hug and kiss. Well, she didn't give me either, and she told me the moment I sat in the car that I'm going to be sleeping on the couch. So
oh,
I'm like, okay. So now 2 months go by. She hardly speaks to me, and I discovered that she was going out, that she was cheating on me this whole time. You know what? This is a side note. I actually deserve to be cheated on, because it was a great lesson from my higher power that, hey, you cheated on your wife. Now it's about time you feel how it is to be cheated on.
right.
And I needed to learn that and that was a message from my higher power. So it was a tough.
Little interjection here. I was in a relationship with this woman for very toxic woman for like 4 years straight. Finally got the hell out of there. That's a long story. But and talking about that and everything, people are just like, did she cheat on you? I'm like, no. I said, to be honest with you, I wish she had. I really do wish she had, because it would have made getting out of there a hell of a lot easier.
Right, right.
So it's just so that's like two polar opposite points of view as far as cheating is concerned. you know,
Yeah.
but I would have welcomed it at that point. But
Well, it was, let's say, it was a very good lesson that I needed to learn, and today I can be emotionally present, and hopefully the woman I'm with will trust me, and I have to earn that trust, because I'm going to be transparent and say I'm a felon, say I have very little money today, but I'm the happiest version of myself, and I could be there for you to support you if you're okay with that in my past. And let's give this a shot. And I have no desire to cheat again in my life, nor do all the other things that I used to do.
well,
So
I firmly believe that that if you do the time that you're sentenced to, and you do what's required of you, and you come back out and everything, guess what? You've done what's required of you by as far as the law is concerned. You know,
absolutely.
I mean, I mean, there are there, if it's some sort of a, like a serial killer or something that gets out on a technicality, that's a different story. Or that's we were talking before about Dexter. That's where somebody like Dexter comes in,
Right.
you know. But but or somebody that does something with, with kids or whatever, they have to register and do all that stuff. But pretty much, unless it's murder or, you know, pedophilia or something like that, you do your time or whatever. It's just, who are you? I mean, it's just you should be awarded the same type of opportunities that anybody else would be, because you're legal. I mean, you've done you did your time.
Yeah,
And that's
I mean,
that
that's
just, I
true.
don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like hearing about these stories about where people, it's just like, let's say, they armed robbery. Nobody was hurt. but they go and they do 5 years or whatever for that, and they're released and everything. And then people are just like, oh, well, he committed that armed robbery. Well, I haven't done anything since. I didn't get into any fights when I was in prison. Whatever, you know, I need a job. I want to, I mean, it just, I don't know.
Yeah. No, you listen.
I've had that mindset even before I became a true crime podcaster. So
Yeah. No, I had a lot of challenges when I left. Besides the one I just shared, it was tough to get jobs because I'm a felon. I had no money. Thankfully, my mom and stepfather helped me. Um, and you know, I view today as every challenge as an opportunity. And so by taking that mindset, I decided to go to addiction studies school and got my KDAC, certified addiction drug counselor. Then I went on to grad school to become a licensed marriage family therapist with an emphasis in addiction and trauma. And so, these obstacles that I was able to overcome by viewing them as the opportunity, not keeping my head down and playing the victim role, and rolling up my sleeves and putting in the work and my commitment to recovery. Today, I'm in gratitude that I have a wonderful job working at Altus Rehab, a 6-bed luxury detox and residential, as a program director and a therapist. And we have an amazing staff, an amazing house, and it's just fun to walk in there. It doesn't feel like a job. And I also work for the Chabad Treatment Center in Los Angeles as a therapist. Also, it's just about giving back, what was once given to me. And my mission in life is to continue to be on podcasts, maybe start my own one day, have a book come out and a movie, and lecture and really help people become vulnerable and have the courage to ask for help, to understand addiction, and to, people, we're all here to help you. And I'm very committed to Gamblers Anonymous, very committed to, just being there for people who want the help. It brings me the greatest joy today to be of service to others.
yeah, that's crazy, and I'm sure that there's a lot more to the story than what you're just going to tell on like an hour long podcast or whatever. But but I think I was gonna ask you. It's just like, okay, do you have a book in the works? Have you started writing one?
Yes, I have a book. I have a book in the works. I will be revealing a lot more than I reveal on podcasts about the entertainment
Right.
space.
Oh, I'm sure,
Yeah,
definitely.
I will be disrupting the entertainment community by speaking the truth and the truth only. It will be followed up by a movie, and then, as I said, I'll be doing speaking engagements and touring, God willing, the world with my message of redemption and learn. And I'm a big advocate for redemption. I'm a big advocate for personal accountability, and I'm a
Right.
big advocate for addiction and recovery. And part of it starts with asking people to have the courage to be vulnerable, like Brene Brown. I admire her, and I
I'm
want
sorry.
to.
Who is that?
Brene Brown is a very famous author. She had one of the top three TED Talks of all time. She's a professor at the University of Houston. She's an author who's had many New York Times bestsellers, and she has this
Oh
beautiful
wow.
message about being vulnerable and many other messages. But for me, I want to go out there and send that message as well. Have the courage to be vulnerable, and really do the work. Like if people do the work in this program, um, they can live a life like I'm living today, not a life where I'm stuck on my past. Like I can't live in my past. I choose not to, I should say. I choose not to live in my past, but it doesn't mean I don't forget that I've forgot my past, right?
Right.
But I don't live in it. I live one day at a time today, and I'm living in gratitude. I don't. I live in a one-bedroom apartment. I have food in my refrigerator. I have a roof over my head, but I'm repairing relationships with my loved ones still. But I don't expect anyone whom I'm repairing relationships with to trust what comes out of my mouth, because what they remember is a mouth that was dishonest and manipulative. So
Yeah.
I would like people my loved ones particularly, to allow me to earn back that trust through the actions that I take on a daily basis, the pro
Yeah.
recovery actions.
Well, that's get that. Yeah. Just I mean, keep my email definitely. if you need help launching the podcast, I can help. But
Thank you.
and I definitely, when you're about to release the book and everything, we'll have you back on.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, this was, this, I'm glad, I'm glad I replied to your publicist's email because I mean, it was an interesting story. Of course, I know that there's a whole lot more, because like as I mentioned before, I was raised in a religious cult. I'm working on a book myself.
Amazing.
I did 2 episodes about the cult, like really early on in this podcast. Um, episodes 10 and 11. I'm on episode, like, I'm closing in on 150 now. But
Congratulations.
thanks. But yeah, I only scratched. I gave the basics. And it took
Yeah.
me, like over 3 hours just to do the basics between 2 episodes. There's a whole lot more that's going to be in the book, so I totally get that and everything. And it's just when you get into nitty gritty details and stuff like that, it's easier to read it than it is to sit there and listen to somebody talk about it. When you're listening to a podcast, you want to hear the highlights. You want to hear,
Yeah.
you don't want to be sitting there for hours and hours and hours, unless I mean, there's exceptions, but for just a basically one-off story or whatever, it's just you've got what you tell in public. If you go to a live speaking engagement, you're going to tell more, and then
Mhm.
obviously in your book you're going to tell a lot more, and then the movie will be a mashup of all of
Yeah,
it.
you
So
could. The movie's going to be Wolf of Wall Street on steroids. So be ready for it. Be ready for my book. I hope it helps people as well as gives them the entertainment value most people are looking for, and I believe it
well,
will.
I can hear the genuine I can hear the genuineness, as in when you talk. I can hear that you're that yeah, you do have the regret. I can I can hear that's just like, okay, I've burned down that bridge. There's no going back to that. But moving forward, I'm doing something else, and I can still be successful with it.
Absolutely.
And I can hear the regret too. The people like your family, like Alanis Morrisette and whatnot. And whoever else. I can hear it all. I believe every word you say.
Thank you. I appreciate that. If I may, if you allow me to, if anyone wants to follow me, I don't have a very big social media presence. I'm just organically growing it. But if I may give my Instagram, it's
Yeah, I'll link it in the episode notes too. But go ahead.
perfect. Yeah, it's the real Jonathan Schwartz.
Okay. Yeah, I'll follow it from my podcast page. From my Instagram page. You don't have any Facebook or Twitter or anything like that?
Not really, not professional one. No, personal, yes, but this is the professional one. And yeah, well, I'll stay in touch with you. Of course, I'll send you a copy of the book. I hope you enjoy it, and I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity and a platform to be here on your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. It was. This was. I was looking forward to this one. I don't get stuff like this very often, so when I did, I was just like, okay, yeah, I want to do this.
Thank you.
I tried to get like another podcast, a couple other podcasters to come on with me or whatever, just so they they could like add to the story if they had something to add, but nobody was available. It's Saturday night.
Very nice.
I'm usually Saturday nights. I'm usually like up. I'm usually walking through the door after work right about now. So it's just
Wow. Yeah.
it's like I don't know what I'm, I don't know being somewhat retired and everything. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with myself.
Well, feel
And,
better. Congratulations on your
oh
retirement. And at 7, after this podcast, I'm going to go to sleep. How's that? This nerd that I am today doesn't really. I'm pretty careful in setting boundaries where I go and not go.
yeah. Well, thanks for coming on,
Thank
and
you.
definitely check, follow his Instagram page. The was it the real Jonathan Schwartz?
Yes.
Okay, and we're going to, and I'll have that linked in the podcast episode. So thanks again. Stay here for just a minute after I hit stop, but thanks again for listening, and until next time, later.